In the last 24th game of 1951 World Championship match, the challenger David Bronstein needed a victory to become the seventh world champion, while for Botvinnik, a draw was enough to retain the title. Botvinnik demonstrated very good defensive skills. On move 7, he destroyed Bronstein's strong pawn center, and on move 9, forced Bronstein to sacrifice a pawn in order to have some chances to win. Bronstein had the initiative for a sacrificed pawn, but missed the opportunity to create tactical complications, and the initiative slipped away. This let Botvinnik complete his development and carry out a simple exchanging combination, after which Bronstein didn't have compensation for the pawn anymore, and the title of world champion slipped away from him together with the initiative in this decisive game of the match. Bronstein started with d4, and Botvinnik played the Slav defense this time. c6, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, e6, bishop g5, and Botvinnik, of course, plays the Botvinnik variation, d takes c. And as Botvinnik was very experienced in this variation and made a lot of important contributions into the development of this variation, Bronstein decided to avoid the main variation, namely e4, after which the very sharp game begins. White occupies the center and attacks the pawn on c4, but b5, this is the main idea of the Botvinnik variation. Black is going to keep the important pawn, and this pawn would limit the light squared bishop, the development of this bishop. And after e5, white is attacking the pinned knight, but black in his turn attacks the bishop, and the game would be in this case very sharp. But Botvinnik was very well prepared for this variation, and that's why Bronstein decided to play a4. The idea is to prevent b5, to prevent black from playing b5 in order to defend the pawn on c4. And Botvinnik played bishop b4. However, later it was found that b5 was actually possible. So black actually can play b5 in this case. And after a takes b, knight takes b5, black can activate the queen with tempo, attacking the knight, and also the pawn on b2 would fall. Now, if knight c3, then queen takes b2, attacking the knight, and after bishop d2, knight d5, a strong move. Or instead of knight c3, if knight a3, then still queen takes b2, knight takes c4, attacking the queen, but a strong move, bishop b4 check, and black equalizes. But Botvinnik, instead of b5, played bishop b4, pinning the knight, which is also perfectly sound. But Bronstein, of course, plays e4, occupying the center and attacking the pawn on c4. In his annotations, Bronstein writes that he expected Botvinnik to play b5 now in order to defend the pawn on c4, and he prepared a takes b, c takes b, e5, attacking the pinned knight, h6. This is the only way to save the piece, attacking the white's bishop in his turn, and after e takes f, h takes g, f takes g, attacking the rook, rook g8, h4, a strong move, g4, h5, the white is threatening to move further, that's why rook takes g7, h6, rook h7, queen c2 attacking the rook, rook h8, queen e4 attacking another rook, queen d5, and queen g4. A very extremely sharp play will begin, and that was exactly what Bronstein wanted to reach, because he desperately needed a victory. So complications were definitely in his favor. But instead of b5, what Bronstein expected, Botvinnik played c5, immediately attacking the center and leaving the pawn on c4 unguarded. Now it turns out that e5 doesn't work, which at first sight is good, attacking the pinned piece. However, black would simply play c takes d, attacking white's pinned piece in his turn. And after e takes f, simply d takes f. White is currently a piece up, but both white pieces are under attack, and black is 3 pawns up. That's why after c5, Bronstein, of course, didn't play e5 and captured the pawn. Bishop takes c4. And Botvinnik, of course, eliminates an important central pawn. C takes d. Knight takes d4. And here again, Bronstein writes that he expected Botvinnik to play queen a5, the natural looking move, attacking the pinned knight second time, unpinning his own knight, and attacking the bishop. But after bishop takes f6, that was Bronstein was going to play. Bishop takes c3 check, b takes c, queen takes c3 check. King simply moves away. King f1, queen takes c4 check, king g1. And it turns out that black doesn't have time to capture the bishop because white is threatening a deadly rook c1, attacking the queen, and the bishop will fall. And after that, of course, the rook would fall too. So black would be forced to play, for example, knight d7 in order to defend the bishop, but still rook c1 attacking the queen, and white in this case would be better. But instead of queen a5, Botvinnik again made an unexpected move. He made a much stronger move, h6, attacking the bishop. And it turns out that if white captures the knight, then after queen takes f6, the position would be absolutely equal. White will not have any initiative and any advantage. On the contrary, maybe even black will have a slight advantage due to the bishop pair. And as Bronstein needed a victory, only a victory would satisfy him, he couldn't afford capturing on f6. So he had to retreat the bishop, and he played bishop e3. But now the pawn on e4 will fall as its defender is pinned. And Botvinnik immediately captures the important central pawn. Knight takes e4, and black is a pawn up now. But Bronstein castles kingside, and it turns out that the knight is under attack. White is threatening to capture, and black king is still uncastled. And black still hasn't finished the development of the queen side. So all this gives white some compensation, some initiative for the sacrificed pawn. And it turns out that capturing on c3 would be bad for black. Sveshnikov, who annotated this game, gives the following variation. If knight takes c3, winning the second pawn, then after b takes c, the bishop is under attack. Bishop takes c3, now a strong move. Bishop b5 check, and it turns out that after bishop d7, white simply captures on e6. The bishop is pinned, bishop cannot capture, and the queen is under attack. So black must take the knight. But after f takes e, queen h5 check would follow. And after king f8, queen c5 check, and white is capturing the bishop and with a better position. Or instead of bishop d7, if knight d7, then rook c1 attacking the bishop. And now if bishop takes d4, then queen takes d4, attacking g7 and vacating d1 square for the rook, after which the pressure would be intolerable on d file. For example, if castle kingside to defend g7, then rook d1. And it turns out that the knight is pinned as the queen would fall, and white would simply win a piece in this case. So that's why after rook c1, as bishop takes d4 doesn't work, bishop a5, black would be forced to play bishop a5, but after queen g4, white will have a strong attack and initiative. So that's why knight takes c3 doesn't work. And the knight is currently under attack on e4. That's why Botvinnik simply retreats the knight. Knight f6. And Bronstein, for a pawn, now has some compensation. He has the initiative. But here he made a fatal mistake. He played queen f3, which at first sight looks like a sound move. He activated the queen, took under control the important diagonal, prevented knight c6, vacated d1 square for the rook. After rook d1, the unpleasant x-ray would be created. However, this move proves to be a mistake because black simply castles kingside, solves the problem of the king safety, and gradually finishes the development of the queen side. Instead of this, instead of queen f3, after which the initiative slips away from Bronstein, it would have been much better to play knight b5, which was indicated by Keres. Bronstein writes that he actually was thinking about this move during the game, but he didn't feel like letting the exchange of the queens uh, because he needed to win. However, it turns out that after queen takes d1, white is winning. Bronstein saw that after Knight c7 check. White has a strong attack. However, he wasn't sure if it was worth a piece. However, it's clear that white is simply winning in this variation. So this is a fork. So in order to save the rook, the king must capture the knight. So white, of course, captures the queen. Check. King takes c7. Black is a piece up, but the devastating attack now starts. Knight b5 check. The king has only one square, king c6. Now, the second rook with great effect comes into play. A terrible discovered check is threatened, actually checkmate in a few moves. Now, if b6, as the king doesn't have any squares to retreat, all squares on d file are controlled by the rook, c7 by the knight, b6 and c5 by the bishop. So uh, black must do something, but b6 vacating b7 square for the king doesn't work because of bishop d5 check, double check, and the rook will fall. Or if bishop c5, in order to close the file at least temporarily, then white simply sacrifices the rook. Probably this is what Bronstein didn't see. Rook d6 check, and now after bishop takes d6, again the file is open and bishop takes e6 check, the only move. Bishop c5, rook takes c5 check, king b6. Now, the terrible discovered check is threatened after the rook moves. It would be a terrible check. So, white makes a move, a strong move. b4, taking under control a5 square. So, the king will have, after discovered check, only one square of retreat to a6, but knight c7 would be checkmate after this. And knight e8, taking under control c7 square in order to prevent the checkmate doesn't help either because of rook takes c8 check, the only move, king a6, and now elimination of the defender of c7 square would follow. Rook takes e8 and knight c7 would be checkmate. So knight b5 would have been a very strong move, the best move in the position, as queen takes d1 doesn't work. So Bronstein writes that instead of this, probably as black cannot castle either, so knight b5 also prevents castling because white would simply exchange the queens and play knight c7, winning the rook. So that means after knight b5, white would retain the initiative and exert even more pressure. So, as queen takes d1 doesn't work, probably knight d7 would be played in this case, and Bronstein writes that knight d6 would be a strong move, check, and after bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, white exerts strong pressure on dark squares and definitely has great compensation for a pawn pressure to bishops, while black doesn't have dark squared bishop in order to defend the dark squares, and the king is still stuck in the center. But instead of all this, Bronstein played queen f3, and he lost the initiative after this. Botvinnik now finally castles. So now the king is relatively safe. Rook d1, so creating unpleasant x-ray, but queen e7, moving away from the x-ray. Rook e1, developing the second rook, and a strong move by Botvinnik. His queenside is still undeveloped, but knight c6, so he is ready to return the pawn in order to finish his development. And it turns out that knight takes c6, winning a pawn, returning the sacrificed pawn, wouldn't be good for white because of simple bishop b7. So black is finishing the development with tempo, attacking the queen. Queen b5 would be followed by rook c8, and white doesn't have anything in this position. That's why after knight c6, Bronstein played queen g3, creating a threat. Bishop takes h6. But simple, king h8. And now Bronstein captures on c6 and b takes c. And what to do next? Black is a pawn up, and white almost doesn't have any compensation for this pawn. Bishop d4. Bronstein still tries to fight for some initiative. And it might have worked actually if Botvinnik made a natural move, bishop b7, finishing the development. of the queen side, that white could have played bishop takes f6, and after queen takes f6, invade the 7th rank, rook d7. But in order to prevent this invasion on the 7th rank, Botvinnik makes a precise move, rook d8 first, taking under control the 7th rank. Rook d3, so probably preparing rook d1 in order to double on the d file. But bishop b7, so Botvinnik finished the development. And now, instead of rook d1, after which still position would have been more or less equal, black would have an extra pawn, and white will have very small compensation, which wouldn't be even enough, most probably. But instead of this, Bronstein, as he felt that the initiative slipped away and he almost doesn't have any chances to fight for win here, he blundered. He played rook e3, and now Botvinnik found a simple combination after which he completely simplified the position and remained with an extra pawn, and Bronstein didn't have any compensation whatsoever for the pawn. You can pause the video and try to find Botvinnik's combination. So he simply exchanges on d4, so sacrificing the exchange. Of course, it's not a real sacrifice because black immediately returns the sacrificed material by playing bishop c5, attacking both rooks. So if the rook on d1 retreats, the rook on e3 would fall. So that's exactly what happened. Bronstein played rook d1, but now bishop takes e3 and queen takes e3. So black is a clear pawn up, and white has no compensation, no initiative, and no opportunities for any kinds of attack. For example, black would play here queen b4, activating the queen, attacking the bishop, and the pawn on b2, and after queen e2, defending both of them, activating the knight, knight d5, and after knight e4, a5, black is a clear pawn up and white has nothing. That's why after queen e3, Botvinnik offered a draw, as a draw was sufficient for him to retain the title, and Bronstein had no other choice than accepting this offer because his position is worse and there is nothing he can do in this position. So the match ended in a draw. Hit the like button and subscribe, as it's really helpful for the channel growth. And see you in next videos.